Now, as we discussed initially, instead of Salesforce data, we would be using the API event as the triggering point for firing this journey. Have you ever faced the dreaded CPU timeout exception in Salesforce? Right when the journey gets executed in Marketing Cloud on the basis of a record change in Salesforce. Right? This issue becomes more frequent when the number of journeys per object increases in Marketing Cloud. So in this video, we are going to see how to tackle this issue, and more importantly, why does this exception happen? So let us start by looking at the current landscape. Right? Most of the Salesforce and SFMC integrations today rely on the same architecture, I would say. Right? In Salesforce, we have Marketing Cloud Connect, and in SFMC, we generally create journeys, and in turn, the journey inserts the data into data extension. Right? So whenever we create a journey in Marketing Cloud, we select the entry source as Salesforce data. So here we have a capability of selecting the object on whose change we want to fire or trigger this journey, and select the entry criteria, filter criteria as per that. Right? Now, what this will do is this will create a record triggered flow in Salesforce, right? Which will have the same criteria that we have defined here. And every time a record changes, the flow will get triggered in Salesforce, which in turn will call an Apex action that will do the call out to SFMC and trigger the journey and insert the data into data extension. Right? Now this is fine. Right? This works completely fine and runs as expected. The issue occurs when I have multiple journeys on the same object. So what Salesforce does is, each time a journey is created, you would see this kind of structure in Salesforce, right? Which would be responsible for evaluating the criteria that we defined in Marketing Cloud, and as per accordingly execute the Apex action to make the call out to SFMC for running the journey. Right? Now, if I create one more journey, so it will branch out a similar kind of structure, and the following entry criteria of the next journey that we created would be defined here, and again an Apex action would be defined to kind of run that journey, and this would go on and on and on. Right? So the number of journeys that you create in Marketing Cloud would define the number of branches that we have in this flow. Right? So you can imagine that this flow is created without any entry criteria. All the records are getting evaluated in this flow, and as per the decision boxes, Salesforce would decide which journey to fire. So you can imagine this as multiple if else statement in Apex code, right, where the criteria are defined in the if statement as per these decision boxes, and whenever that condition meets, this Apex action would get invoked that will make a call out to SFMC, which in turn will run the journey that is defined in Marketing Cloud. Now, one argument we can get is, why don't we ourselves define the entry condition in the flow, right? So we can do that, but the problem is, anytime a journey is created or updated in Marketing Cloud with the same object and the entry source as Salesforce data, this flow will get overridden by the entry conditions that we have defined over there. Right? So this entry conditions would get removed, a new version would get created, and additionally the decision boxes would get changed here as per the criteria defined in Marketing Cloud. Right? Now, to resolve this, I've seen a couple of articles as well for this exception, but I didn't get any convincing answer for this, right? Because here also in the resolution, this mentions that the complexity of filters keeps on growing as per the number of journeys per object increases, right? And the other thing is, they've mentioned to reduce the batch size of the updates, right? So anyways, I'd say trigger runs in the batch size of 200 only. So any piece of code or any piece of logic that is giving CPU timeout exception with 200 records is considered to be not optimized, ideally optimized, right? Like if it is operating over multiple objects or has very complex logic, then maybe it is acceptable. But here what we are doing is we are just making a call out to SFMC for 200 records, right? So kind of this argument, I'm not that convinced with this resolution or the argument given in this article, right? So now the main thing here is, what is the solution for this, right? So anytime Salesforce provides us with an out-of-the-box solution that does not cater to our problem statement or our use case, maybe our use case is getting way more complex for that out-of-the-box solution, what do we generally do is we take control in our own hands and develop a custom solution for that, right? So we are going to do the same thing here as well. So what we will do is entirely remove the Salesforce data as the entry source for journey and replace that with API event, right? And create a custom framework on our side in Salesforce, in Apex, that would be responsible for making call out to SFMC, and these journeys would get triggered on the basis of the API event that we would fire from Salesforce to marketing. Now, before getting our hands dirty with Apex, we have to authorize Salesforce and SFMC, right? So for that, we can go to Marketing Cloud and create an install package. So this is kind of a connected app in Marketing Cloud, which will provide us the client ID and client secret here, right? And in Salesforce, we can create a name credential with client credentials flow that will utilize the client ID and client secret generated by Marketing Cloud, which would be used for authorization, right? So what we are going to do is we are going to hit this service. Right? I'll link the help article of this documentation in the description as well. This would be responsible for executing the journey, right, for the records that we would pass, right? So this would execute the journey as well and insert the data into data extension that we would be passing from Salesforce, right? Now the important thing that we need to notice in this name credential is so I'm not going to go entirely through how to create name credentials and connect it up. There are many help articles available online. You can go through those, or maybe you can refer the last video that I created for Twilio and Salesforce integration. That also would cover the connected app and name credentials concept, how to go about it, right? But the main thing here to concentrate is the scopes, right? Which scopes we have to give to kind of interact with a Marketing Cloud, right? So an interesting way that I found out to determine which scopes are needed would be to check in this article here, right? There is one more article as REST API permission set ID scopes, and just copy your service that you're going to hit and paste it here, right? So what this would do is this would let you know which scopes are needed to be added directly in Marketing Cloud as well as the name credential Salesforce as well, right? So here you can see there is one scope as list underscore and subscribers read, right? And another is journeys read this. So these two scopes should be present here, and they should be configured in the installed package as well under this tree, right? Which you can see here. Journeys read permission is given, and list and subscribers read and write is given. Now let us create the data extension and journey that we need to trigger from Apex Salesforce, right? So I've already created the data extension with few attributes as Salesforce ID, first name, last name, and email address, right? Now the point to note here is I've assigned SFID as primary key and email address as the subscriber key, right? You can define the subscriber relationship here as email address. So I've seen many people get confused between primary key and subscriber key. No, both are not the same. They can be same, but generally I wouldn't recommend to keep it the same, as primary key is just an identifier on the database level for the uniqueness of the record, right? And subscriber key is the identifier for a subscriber that is present in Marketing Cloud for communication, right? So subscriber key should be something like any identifier that would remain same across the sales lifecycle in Salesforce or any CRM, right? So in this case, email address would be one of the good identifiers. Any identifier that you have in your sales lifecycle that remains the same throughout the sales lifecycle uh, of the prospect, that should be good for using as subscriber key. You can use the lead ID as well, but the problem is lead ID would change once it is converted, right? Then you would get the account, contact, and opportunity ID, uh, where the subscriber essentially is the same in Salesforce, but it would be treated as different in the Marketing Cloud because the ID changes. Right? So hence a good identifier for subscriber key is something that remains the same in the sales lifecycle. Right? So in this case, I have just given email address as the subscriber key. Right? Now let us move to journey and create a journey by the name as lead email. Right? Now, as we discussed initially, instead of Salesforce data, we would be using the API event as the triggering point for firing this journey. Right? Now we have to select a data extension for this. So I'll select the same data extension that we created. DD and just click on done. So now we can introduce an email action in the journey, right? I've already created one email for this demo. Let me just select that lead email and click on done. Right. And the entry criteria for this journey must be defined in Salesforce, right? So the whole purpose that we are rethinking about this process is we want to have more control in our hands on when the journey should get executed. Right. Now, before saving and activating this journey, couple of things is make sure that the email attribute is selected as email address that you defined in the data extension, and select the contact entry as re-entry anytime. Okay, and click on done. And click on validate. Right, and just click on activate. We have our journey created here. So I think all the things that we need to do is right. Data extension needs to be created in Marketing Cloud, an associated journey that would fire an email. So mostly everything is done on Marketing Cloud. Now we just need to invoke this journey from Apex. Right. So we saw which URL to hit, right, for firing this journey. Let us see the structure of the request body that we need to pass, right? So this in this JSON that we need to pass in the body of the request that we are going to send to Marketing Cloud, there are a couple of important attributes. First is the event definition key, which would be mentioned in the journey here, right? This is the event definition key that we need. The next thing is the contact key, that is the subscriber key. Contact key and subscriber key are both the same, right? And data would mention all the attributes that we created in the data extension. These attributes should be present. Right? Now let us move to VS Code and see how we can write a code for making the call out for executing the journey. Right. So for that, let us make this class as async, maybe implement as queuable, and allow for callouts. Right. So the main purpose for making it async is generally the scenarios that we are planning to tackle are running the journeys from trigger context only, right? And we all know from trigger we cannot make the call out. So just to split the transaction, we can implement this as queuable. And let me grab the boilerplate code for making the call out to Marketing Cloud. Right. So this is the service that we are going to hit for running the journey, and this is the name credential that we created at the beginning. Right. Let me just save this. Now the next thing is we need the request body. Let me just grab that and paste it here. Right. Let us analyze the request body that I have pasted and see what is going on here. Right. So here, as you can see, so the first record that we are going to hit has these 4 attributes. Right. The sample key is their first name, last name, and an email address. And again, this contact key is same as the email address. Right. As we had configured the email address as subscriber key, and subscriber key is just in technical terms here is defined as contact key in marketing. Right. And similarly, the second record we have defined here, and the event definition key we need to replace it from here. Right. Let me just paste it over here. Right. And let me convert it to one liner and paste this data here. Right. So now we have our request body ready. Right. So let us get it deployed and just keep the code ready for executing this queuable job. Right. Right. So this code is deployed now. Right. Now let us execute it. Let me refresh the data extension and see if we have the records that we fired. So yes, we can see the records that we just fired from Salesforce got inserted into the data extension. Now the next thing that we need to verify is whether they got into our journey as well. So yes, as we can see, the journey was executed for the 2 subscribers that we just sent from Salesforce. Right. Let me go to the inbox and see. We have received the email as well that we had configured in Marketing Cloud. Right. Now this is okay. We are able to kind of make the call out and run journey as per our requirement. Right. This is all hard coded, but we want to run multiple journeys across multiple objects. Right. So somehow we have to make our code configurable enough that at the runtime it should be able to decide which journey should hit and what data to refer to. Right. Because replicating the same code for multiple journeys wouldn't be a good idea. Right. So for that, I have created a custom metadata, right, where we would be storing the config that would be used by Apex to uh, dynamically parse and at runtime decide which journey should be running. Right. So to define the structure of this config, let us think through what all would be needed. Right. So first thing that we need is the definition key, right, that we want to hit. This would be the event definition key of the journey. Right. Next thing, as an identifier in the body that we saw, was we should know the contact key, which is the subscriber key that we have configured in Marketing Cloud data extension. Right. So that in our case is the email address field. Right. And the next thing is maybe we want to send the lead data across from Salesforce to Marketing Cloud. Right. So we have to define a field mapping of which Salesforce field should get mapped to the corresponding data extension attribute on the Marketing Cloud side. Right. So this could be one of the structure that we can configure. Let me create the metadata record here for the same. Let us give this as some name, SFMC journey, and paste this here. Right. Now the next thing that we need to do is refer this config and make changes in our Apex code accordingly so that it is capable of determining which journey to hit and what data to map to that specific data extension at the runtime. Right. Now let us see how we can use this configuration in our Apex to make it more dynamic and run the journeys as per the config defined. Right. So let us think through what would be needed to enhance this class. Right. So the first thing I can think of is the list of records that we want to pass to this framework, and which in turn will transform uh, the list of records as per the mapping given here, and construct the request body to pass it to SFMC to in turn run the journey. Right. So we can pass the list of records here, and maybe the custom metadata name that we have defined here, so that the framework knows which custom metadata to refer for the configuration and the field map. Right. Next thing, we can just fetch the custom metadata on the basis of the process name given and store it in a string. Right. So this config that we had stored is in this variable currently. Now we have to kind of deserialize and parse it in a structure, right? So we can create a wrapper. So you can see one of the keys that we have is definition key, subscriber key attribute, and then there is field and attribute mapping. So I've defined a wrapper with the same attributes, right? Further, we can write the logic to deserialize it into this wrapper. Now the most interesting part, where we will utilize the configuration that we defined in the metadata and the record list, and kind of dynamically generate the request body that is needed for hitting the journey, right? So for that, we'll create a method called as get journey request body uh, that will do all the heavy lifting of generating the request body, right? So let us understand the definition of this method, right? So for this, we are passing the config and the record list here and iterating over each record, trying to generate the required request format, right? So just to recall, right, in our request format, we need the event definition key, a members array that is of each record, and inside each record, we need the data where the field attribute of data extension is given along with the value, and the contact key mentions the subscriber key value here, right? So we have the definition key, right? We are constructing the members array here and defining the contact key, and the data map is getting constructed over here, right? Where we are mentioning for each of the SF field, kind of fetch the target attribute of the data extension using the mapping and create the data map accordingly, right? Now, once we have this method done, I think we have invoked this here as well. Now, let us just deploy this. Okay, so we have the code deployed now, and let us grab the script to execute this code, right? So what I've done is I've already created few sample leads, right, where the first name, last name, and email is populated, and I'm passing those leads to this framework along with the custom metadata name that we had given, right? So let us execute this piece of code and see if we get the email or not. Let me go back to my email and check if we have received the email or not. So as you can see here, we have received the email that we had configured in the journey, right? Let us refresh the journey as well and see, just to verify. Okay, yeah. So we can see here that the other two subscribers that we just fired the journey for also got the email, right? And we also saw it here. Now these are just the basics of the framework, I'd say, right? We can introduce many more complex layers here, logical layers, to cater to real world scenarios. right? So one of the scenarios that I can think of is maybe I want to pass the list of contacts, right, to this framework. Now earlier, we had only one-to-one mapping, as first name was mapped to first underscore name, email was mapped to lead underscore address. But in this case, maybe I want to pass the account name, right? So we have to introduce an additional logic layer here to traverse through the child to parent uh, hierarchy and access the parent field, right, over here. So this would only get the one-to-one mapping. This won't be able to traverse to the parent accounts or the parent objects field, right? Another scenario that I can think of is maybe I want to run this process in multiple countries, right? Currently, how we introduced a layer of process name that was giving us the definition for which journey we want to execute, right? Similarly, we can introduce one more layer as country, right? So how it would go is like for this particular process in that country, I want to execute this definition, and accordingly our framework would execute that journey, right? So these are just some of the examples of extending this framework, but again the possibilities I would say are endless, right? You can enhance this framework in any of the ways that you would like to and introduce multiple layers of logic accordingly, right? So I think this is it for this video. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye bye.